Today on the Railway Room, it's part 4 of phase 1 of my new build 009 model railway. Hello friends and welcome back to the Railway Room. So yes, today it's part 4 of phase 1 of my new build 009 model railway. And in this video I'm going to be looking at doing the scenery across the left hand end and around the back of the layout. And then at the end of the video there's some big news about the layout, some changes that I'm making, some redesigning of the ideas behind it. So that's going to be at the end. But before that, let's start cracking into it and having to get some scenery done. And a little bit of work I've done off camera since the last video. I just painted all down the sides in a black just to protect it, and I've added on these old souvenir nameplates of various narrow gauge logos that I got back in the 90s. I rather wish these were still available. I really like them, but quite difficult to find now. And again, just painted around here. In this video, my plan is to work on this end of the layout and then down the back beyond the boundary fence. To start with this end, I've just knocked together this little bit of a framework. So the ends here is cut to shape from plastic card, and then I've got a riser coming up here that's cut from foam board, and that's designed to fit in here roughly. So the idea is that this is going to be a bit of a track coming up at the back of the layout here, and then it meets another track that goes across a bridge on this end. So this is the bridge, which is one I've saved from my last layout. That's going to go on the end, and so I've designed the curve on this to match the curve on the bridge. But for now I'm just going to put a nice bit of glue on the underside of this just to stick that into position. The reason for having this plastic on this end here is so that I can attach the scenery items to this rather than to the back scene, because I got into trouble on my first layout by putting the scenery directly gluing it to the back scene. So I wound up with all bits of ground cover and grass and things stuck onto the back scene in the sky, and that didn't really look very good. That's something I'm definitely trying to avoid this time by having the back scene completely separate. So let's just leave that in position to dry. And I've got here, it's just some pieces of old foam packaging, which I roughly cut to the shape that I want to. And then I'm just going to put these in here, glue them into position, and then I'll put the top surface down. I've also got a piece of Will's wooden planking sheeting here, which I've cut to length, and I've just put a little bit of risers on the back. So this is going to sit down the end of the platform here to form the walkway across to the island platform. If I do wind up extending the layout this way at some point in the future, then I'll just have to take this off and just put a track level crossing in there. Okay, so this is all dried in nicely, and I've also added the retaining walls to the bridge, and that's all glued in. And just along this old pathway here, I've just glued in some Will's sheeting. In the interest of being frugal, this is all material that I reclaimed from my first layout. It's going to need a bit of a repaint on it, but I'm not going to bother doing that until after I've got the ground cover in. So what I'm going to do next, I'm just going to make up some wall filler with some brown acrylic paint mixed into it, and I'm then going to put this all across the top to become my basic ground cover, and that's going to come all the way down behind the fence just to be the basic ground cover along this path trackway, just so that it's not too flat like the board. There's a little bit of texture. So before I come and start putting the static grass in, I just want to put some earth texture on top of that, so that it's not just straight wall filler. So I've got a couple of bags here that I've had many years since I had on my first layout. There's a couple of Woodland Scenics ones, a fine turf earth and a fine turf soil, and there's a couple of bags here that I picked up from the 009 Society sales table. There's no markings on them, so I'm not sure exactly where they came from, but some nice kind of earthy soil textures there. So I'm just going to basically paint along with watered down PVA and then sprinkle my soil textures on the top, and then after that I will be sticking more glue on just to make sure everything's nicely glued down. And I'm just going to do a small section at a time. Right, so what I've got done is I've just gone all the way down, around and over the top with those 3 scatters, just getting a basic ground cover in. I've then come back along the path, just along the bottom of the embankment, right by the fence there, and right the way down to the front. And I've just used some of this Woodland Scenics fine dark brown ballast on that, just so that's a stone ballasted path, because obviously there's going to be quite a few enthusiasts walking down there trying to take pictures of the trains. I would think it's certainly somewhere that I would go. And I've also used the dark soil to get a bit of the centre of the pathway up the embankment. That's not going to be actually stoned, that's just going to be kind of a muddy path up there. So the next thing I'm going to do before I start on the grass, I just want to make sure all of this stuff is glued in nicely. So the first time I've got a little mister spray, I'm going to go and spray it all, and then I've got my PVA mix, and I've got a syringe this time, so I'm just going to be syringing the glue in. Pretty standard technique. While this is drying, I'm just going to prepare my hedgerow that I want to go around the back. So what I've got is part of this Woodland Scenics hedgerow kit. It's got about 3 foot here of the rubberised horsehair, which is pretty good. In terms of height, it's a little bit tall, but hedgerows obviously come in all different kinds of sizes. This is very wide for 00 for 4mm scale though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it down the middle to make it half the width. Okay, so this is going to be my first attempt at applying static grass in anger directly onto an actual layout, rather than just a bit of a test. So fingers crossed this goes well. What I'm using is the WWS basing glue, and my applicator is loaded up with some WWS 2mm summer patchy grass in there. Hopefully I'm going to be able to squeeze the glue down. And I'm just wanting to have it around a small area around the bottom of the fence, to the rear, just in front of where the hedge is going to be. And again, I'm just going to do a very small bit to start with, just to see how this goes. Where's my twitch? And Yeah, so it's maybe a little bit underwhelming at the moment, but hopefully with a bit of practice it'll get better. I'm just going to leave it to dry for a bit, and then I'll come around with my little mini hoover and hoover up the stuff that's not stuck and see where we're at before I carry on attempting to do any more. I've got my length of rubberized horsehair and I've glued a load of green flock along it. So I've cut this to roughly half the height and to just the right length to come along the front of this embankment along the back, and I'm just going to hopefully glue it into position. So I now need to get some extra detailing down this path at the back. So I've got this from Woodland Scenics, it's their forest scatter. And I've also got in here just some bits of sawdust that I reclaimed from when I was sawing up wood for the baseboards, so I'm just going to sprinkle a little of this on as well. And then, again, this came from WWS, but you get it from various places. It's kind of licheny stuff. It's a bit like it can be used for a bush to come at the end of the hedge. I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing here. I'm just going to wet it up with the misting spray. Syringe in some glue. There's another WWS one, 6mm Wild Meadow. I'm not entirely sure who made these because I got them in a bag of bits from the 009 Society sales stand, but there's a couple of rather nice pots of flowers there, which I think I'm going to put in quite nicely either side of the steps to the signal box. So I'm just going to put a little bit of PVA glue on the bottom of them and be able to put that into position. Put the other one on this side. If I can get it to stand up properly. So I've realised I made a little bit of a mistake over here. Because I want these vertical parts to be open rock face, but obviously the filler that I've used is coloured brown because it's just the same all the way across. So I need to paint these, but I should have done it before I started gluing this flocking on the top. So before I go any further, I'm just going to get a bit of matte grey. I've got a couple of different shades I'm going to use in. I'm just going to try and gently paint in these sections here. There's probably going to be little bits that's going to get on top of the flock, which is not ideal, but can't really be avoided. I should have painted this before starting adding the flock. And so for the old infilled bridge here, I've just got a folded up bit of scrap paper that's going to go in, maybe this way around, just to provide a base slope. And then, oh, there's something down here. I've just got a strip of Wells Sheets wooden planking. I've just lightly painted it over in a couple of browns just to make it a little bit less plasticky looking, and then I'm going to glue that in the front. There's going to then be a walkway around the tracks onto the island platform. And just because I do quite enjoy getting a bit messy, I'm gonna do a bit of papier-mâché. Woo! Cool, and so once I've got at least 3 layers onto each, preferably 4 or 5, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to leave it to dry for now, overnight, and then we'll come back to it tomorrow. So now this is dried, I'll just quickly paint over it with a basic brown acrylic. Actually, while it's still a bit wet, I'm going to come and start sprinkling. So I'm going to scatter down. So down on the ends, it's going to be the same stone as platforms. And, earth. Down over the rest. And at this point it doesn't matter who's getting on the planking there, I can clean that up quite easily in a bit. And so I've actually tipped the layout up on its end now so that things are dropping down towards the corner. And I'm just going to put a little dead leaves down here because I want to put a tree in this corner. And then a little bit more of this wood scatter as well, just in this corner. And then I'll just mist it over with plain water and stick some watered down PVA on. So then I'm just going to come around with a bit of the basing glue. Having hoovered up the excess, I'm just going to lightly glue some bits of this lichen material across. I'm just going to get a little bit of glue and just dab randomly on here, but mostly around where I've got the joins and probably a bit up here. And then I've got some slightly clumpy flocky material. I'm just going to press in and see where it sticks. Now I'll just leave that to let the glue dry, and then I'll come back around with my hoover and hoover up all the spare bits. So I want to have a couple of trees around the back of the layout as well. So what I'm planning to use is these Woodland Scenics tree armatures. I actually bought a box of these many years ago when I was building my first layout. I only ever built one because I wasn't very happy with it. And we came off the layout when I moved house at some point, and I never bothered putting it back up or building any more of them. But I think with a bit more experience, hopefully I'll be able to make something worthwhile with these now. So I'm planning to build some of these using seafoam for extra branches towards the end. But what I've actually got in is some of this Woodland Scenics early fall foliage. And it turns out this is actually very clumpy, and it's not really going to work with the seafoam because the seafoam is going to be much too fragile. So what I'll do is I'll build a couple of these the old-fashioned way using this Woodland Scenics foliage, and then I'll build some others using the seafoam and probably some WWS foliage. I think it's good to have a combination of different techniques for building the trees so they don't all just look identical. Now the tricky thing with these Woodland Scenics armatures is when you get them they are flat, so all of the branches are coming out of the tree trunk the same two directions, which is not particularly realistic. So you do have to then bend the branches around. Some of them's easier to bend than others. I have to try and disguise the fact that it's ultimately quite a flat armature, and to get stuff to cover as much of the different angles as you can. So one thing that's quite cool about these Woodland Scenics armatures is that they are quite easy to bend in different ways, so that you can get a whole load of different shapes of trees out of the same initial basic armature. You just need to kind of make sure that every sort of junction where the branches are branching off in different directions are nicely different odd angles to each other, to try and bend things around to fill in the obvious gaps. One thing that is slightly tricky is trying to make sure that you get them bending nicely and not just getting super sharp right angles. I've got a bit of a sharp one there, but you need to make sure you don't get some right angled bends in these. That's not very realistic. Now I've been a little bit critical of these in terms of the fact that they tend to come out relatively flat. Even you can see even like that it's still got a relatively kind of oval shape, not a round shape. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for this layout because it's only a 1 foot wide, so it is quite narrow. So having a tree sort of shaped like that along the back, you're not really going to notice, as long as there's a good amount of branches coming fore and aft. So once I've kind of bent that to a shape that I'm reasonably happy with, I'm then going to spray paint these up with a textured brown paint, just so that it doesn't look too obviously plastic under there, and then I'll get some foliage attached. Okay, so I've got my two new trees here, and they've been painted over in that textured brown spray paint, and I'm just going to dab a little bit of PVA glue onto the trunk and a couple of the branches there as well. Just lightly bob a little on at random. And so now I'm just going to get a little bit of fairly fine light green flock and just sprinkle that onto the glue there to represent some kind of lichen or moss, something growing on the tree trunk. And then I'll just give it a little bit of a tack to shape off any excess. And hopefully that's looking a bit more tree-like now. So what I've done here is I've actually gone ahead and made my tree while unfortunately forgetting to push the record button on the camera. But it was a simple matter of painting some PVA glue onto the ends of the branches and then sticking clumps of this Woodland Scenics foliage onto the ends, and then I'm just going to have a quick spray of some spray glue onto the top and sprinkle some loose bits of the foliage on as well. And there are my two trees, so I'll just let the glue dry off now before I plant them. Okay, so I just drilled a little hole into the scenery there, bit of PVA on the bottom of the tree, and hopefully it's just going to be able to stick in there. Nice. And then I'll just glue in another bit of this licheny stuff around the bottom to cover the base of the tree so you can't see there's no roots. Lovely. And so the second tree is going to go at the bottom of the the incline where the path splits there. So as I was just resting my trees on the layout while I was preparing the place to put them in, I happened to pop this tree here just randomly, and I realised actually it's quite a nice place for it. I think it looks quite good there. So I'm just going to carefully scrape away some of this ground cover here and then get it glued into position, and then put some of the ground cover back in over there. So I just check the clearances. That's my finger, not the engine, so that's all good, and if necessary I can always bend the branches. So just put a bit of PVA down, and then I'll squish that into the position where I want it. And once I've got it hopefully bedded in quite nice, just going to gently wet the area, and then hopefully I can squirt in without upsetting it too much. Some of the old watered down PVA. And so just to finish off then, I've just got another pack of this Gauge Master Great Western fencing that I'm going to glue across the back end of the platform here, which is just the same fencing that I used down the back of the layout as well. So I'm not going to show that in much detail now. I'm just going to get a little bit of weathering powder. This one is a mud green apparently. Just a little bit of a static grass tuft down under the edge at the bottom here, if I can get it off my tweezers. Now I'd like to add a little bit of extra life to the scene with a bit of wildlife, so I picked up from Scale 3D, if you can see it, this pack of 14 bunny rabbits. Unfortunately they are so fragile that quite a few of the ears have snapped off. You see that one's only got one. I'm not sure if that happened during delivery or since they arrived, so I'm going to have to try and get some little extra bits of plastic card, maybe parts of supports from other 3D prints, and glue them on. Otherwise it's going to look like some kind of crazy Watership Down thing's been going on, kind of bunny battle royale or something. I don't really want that. Most of these rabbits are going to go in the scenic section further up the line, but I thought I'd just stick a couple of them in around the station area. There he is down there just peeking through the railings, and there's another one right at the back skulking around those bushes. So I also picked up this pack of 24 birds. Again, a lot of these are going to go further up the layout, but I've just put a couple of them into the trees. So there's one hiding up in the tree there. And so I've also added this little cat here. He's in the undergrowth stalking the rabbit over here. But hopefully the signalman's dog is going to wake up and come to the rescue before things get out of hand. So looking at this, I'm just thinking I could probably do with some kind of railings along the edge of the end of the platform here. So I've picked up these Gauge Master Safety Railings GM383. You get two of these frets. On each one you've got two of the longer style railings and then one set of a slightly shorter railing. So hopefully some combination of these are going to work for the spaces where I need them. So I'll just cut them off the fret and then see if I can measure them up. Put the small ones over this side, somewhere along there. I'll use the slightly longer railings down this side. That one's So I've also realised that whilst I've got nice autumny coloured trees and leaves and things, this bushes along here, the lichen, I've only used a dark green colour. It doesn't look massively autumny. So I have picked up this Jarvis bulk pack of mixed colour lichen. Some really nice autumny colours in there, some yellows, browns, oranges. It's a big packet because I'm going to be using quite a bit further up the line in the scenic areas. So I'm just going to stick some slightly more autumny coloured sections of this in. So I could do with maybe a bit more leaflet that's blown across towards the box. So I've picked up this Jarvis extra fine autumn leaflet, which I think is quite a nice colour. I quite like that actually. So what I'm just going to do, using an old blade, dab some PVA glue along the gutter. You could do with gluing that back on both sides. So I've just dabbed some bits on top of the roof of the box as well, making sure to get some down in the back of the chimney. And then I'm just going to scatter some of this onto the PVA and give it a bit of chance to dry. And so now I've allowed that to dry a bit, I'll just come along with my mini hoover and suck up all the bits that aren't stuck. So a final touch to mention is that I've also added some of these WWS mixed autumn scatter and yellow scatter, just very small amounts around the end and across here, just to add a bit more autumny colour to it. And also I thought the colours of the Jarvis lichen was a little bit too bright and garish, so I've taken a wash of a light brown acrylic and just lightly put some of that over it just to help it blend in a little bit better. So let's just have a couple of shots of the final scene as it stands now before we go into wrapping things up. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good place to leave it for now. I think that area is starting to come together quite nicely. The next few videos in phase 1, I'm going to be looking at the engine shed and the loco servicing area, and then I'm not very happy with the platform surfaces, so I'm going to be resurfacing the platforms, building the station building and the pub, and then I'm also starting work on the second board, with the line climbing up out of the station past the church. I'm not sure what order those videos are going to come together because I'm kind of working on them all at the same time, so whichever gets done first will be the video that comes out next. Now at the start of the video I did promise some big news about some changes to the railway, so there's a couple of things, some quite minor, some fairly major. So one small thing is that as I've mentioned earlier during the video, I've decided to set the layout during autumn because I really love the autumn colours. However, I had set upon using this Pico Valley back scene across behind the station, and sadly the colours of that is a lot of very deep greens, sort of spring summer type colours, which aren't really going to match the autumn scenery at the front. So sadly that means I'm not going to be able to use this back scene. Unfortunately, it was the presence of the little islands in the front of the river in this back scene that prompted the choice of the name of the station of Innisbach. So if I change the back scene, that name of the station is not really going to make much sense anymore. So I'm changing the name of the station. I'm now taking the name for it from the church, which is going to be on the second board, so it's now going to be known as Llanbed Beichen. So that's the small change. Now the big change I think is going to be very positive. If you remember back in the first video, the idea was that I was going to build a number of separate scenes which were then interlinked, and I'd work on one board, get that completed, or reasonably well completed, before starting on the next one. And so it would effectively be like a preserved railway reopening in sections as the layout expanded around the board. So one problem with that I've discovered is that I'm doing scenic work on one area, putting glue down, and then I've got to let it dry, and that's pretty much all the work that I can do until the next week, because I only really get one modelling day per week. So I think it would be really beneficial to be able to work on multiple boards at the same time, so that I can flip from one section to another and back. That should hopefully allow the layout to be built a lot quicker than it has been up to this point. Another potential issue that I've realised is the idea was to have the main station in one corner of the room, then going around to the intermediate station in the second corner, and then continuing around to a third station eventually in the opposite corner of the room to the first station. Now in an exhibition setting, that's great, but this is a home layout which I'm going to be operating on my own pretty much the whole time. So it would be advantageous to be able to operate the layout from one central control area. As such, I've decided that instead of just continuing in a one straight run around the edge of the room, what's going to happen is I'm going to have the first board and the second board with the climb out of the village. They're going to remain the same. Now the next board was originally planned to be a fiddle yard section. I'm doing away with that, and that board is now going to be the central passing loop station. And then after that, the board that was going to be the central passing station, that I'm going to be reusing the frames from Dolgarrog, that is now going to be the gorge section, and it's going to work as a kind of a balloon loop going around in a big circle and climbing all the time, so it's going to come out on a little ledge at the back of the central passing station board, if you can follow that. So all of this has meant that I've had to fairly significantly rethink the fake history and the geography of the railway that the model is representing. So I've rewritten that, and it's all updated on the website now. If you're interested, then feel free to go and have a look on that. I will be going into a bit more detail as to all the changes that I've made and the logics behind them in the blog. So again, if you're interested, there'll be a link somewhere up here or down in the description where you can find out all of that. But the upshot of all these changes is that progress on the layout has sped up considerably, because I'm now working on all areas of the layout at the same time. So for example, the gorge section that I envisage as being the heart of the layout and where the name of the layout comes from, that was originally going to be, was probably 3 or maybe even 4 years before I even start thinking about building that section. But now the frames and the boards are all ready to go. I'm just calculating the gradients before I can then get the track laid. So things are definitely moving forward a lot quicker than they were before. So obviously this does mean that the original idea of having the preserved railway slowly extending has now been lost. But I think you'll agree that the trade-off with getting things built much quicker and more efficiently will ultimately be worthwhile. And so really that's where we are at this point. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to do the comment, like, subscribe, all of that jazz. There's no pressure, it's all good. And I'll see you again next time. And thank you very much for watching.